Okay. I'll talk to you after, if that's okay. Yeah, thank you.
All right, then we can move on.
You ready? Okay. Good morning, and thank you all for being here. Purpose of our meeting today is to talk about an upcoming project that the city has been working on for a long time and very excited about. Be very kind of impactful, we think, for the community, and it is focused on really stopping the tidal inundation that we know comes from the intercoastal waterway on these extreme tidal events that we've been having kind of more and more frequently. And we wanted to just go through today the kind of evolution of this project and what it's kind of how it started and where we find ourselves today. I'm gonna hand it over to Thomas and Hutton. We have Rick and Maria here with the engineering firm that's been involved with this project since the beginning. So they're going to go through the real details and the kind of nitty gritty of the project itself, and then we will go through the release and kind of ultimately what's bringing this issue to a head for us right now is we have been requested by Wild Dunes, who is allowing, they're agreeable to allowing this project to happen on their property, but they've made it clear to us that because the city cannot indemnify them, which is a requirement of the state code that cities can't indemnify people, they have asked each individual property owner abutting their property to indemnify them. So that's really what's bringing the issue to a head now, is this indemnification agreement that we are asking each of you all to sign. So we'll go through that request from them. We will talk through kind of what is expected or how we can help you all execute those agreements if you're willing to do that. And then we'll just open it up to general questions about the project or about the release or anything that you may have. So with that, I'll just say kind of from a very high level, this project started maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago with the idea of replacing the aged Waterway Boulevard path. So this is the multi-use path adjacent to the roadway on the front of all of your properties. That path is in very bad shape. Tree roots are heaving the asphalt kind of continuously through that path. So it has been in our budget and our work plan now for many, many years to replace that path. Along the way, the idea came up between the staff and Thomas and Hutton is that path just happens to make a very clear delineation that would protect from the tidal waters coming in if we could stop the water at that path. So it is very much evolved from just a path replacement project to now a full flood barrier project. Would also just add that, and I think both of you all know this, that we have two distinct types of flooding that happens on the island. We have flooding that's generated from rainfall, that, and the water, we need to get that water into a drain and get that drain out. That drainage has its own kind of complications and challenges, and we deal with that constantly. But the other thing that we deal with, and it's a little bit harder to see because it probably almost always happens in conjunction with rainfall, but it's these extreme high tide events. The two are very different. The two can happen completely independent of each other. And this project is really geared at stopping that tidal inundation. It happens to have a fair amount of stormwater infrastructure to also get the rainwater out associated with it. But really the goal here is to stop that tidal inundation from getting from the intercoastal waterway into the interior of the island, which is what we saw considerably at the nor'easter last December. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rick and Maria, and they can.
Can I ask one, just a quick one before
Sure.
it starts? So the big thing in the contract that we're being asked to sign is, quote, flood mitigation work. But there's no attachment on exactly what that is. So when you make your presentation, is that an exhibit, flood mitigation work? Because we don't know exactly what that is.
Yeah, and Brenda, so we'll get to what the agreement, I would say let's just go through the details of the project. But to Brenda, and Brenda's made a good point that there is other work clearly happening on the golf course, not associated with the city at all. And we'll get to the language, the very specific language in the release that's being requested of you all is the work being done at the request of the city as part of the flood mitigation project. I think Brenda's question is, could a lawyer argue that work that was done outside of the city's project, could they use this hold harmless as a defense for that work? Have to, I'm not an attorney. I mean, that would be, I think, something that you all would want. If you are concerned about your ability to sue, I would think that you would want to get your own legal advice. I've offered to involve the city's attorney if you would like some kind of legal advice from the city's attorney, we could do that. I just don't have authority over the Wild Dunes attorneys, and I will say they've been great to work with. They've been very agreeable to all of this work. But at the end of the day, they are very much saying, this is your project. City,
Well,
you,
we'll put that in writing, that the flood mitigation work in their contract refers only to the work that's being done by, that Rick is gonna tell us.
yeah, I don't know that. I don't know that.
Well, that's a.
Yeah, I don't know how much work they're willing to do to beyond what they've already done for clarification, but we could certainly ask if they could add that detail that it's definitely implied in the language, but it would be a clarification. So do you all mind just holding, and we'll go through, because I think some of it will be answered. And so just hold your questions and we'll get through it, and then we'll come back and have a whole Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Douglas. And as Douglas said, I'm Rick Karkowski with Thompson Hutton Engineering. I've been working with Isle of Palms going back to the origination of this project, even before that. We're very excited to be able to do a very impactful, we've already done, I think, 2 projects that have been significantly impactful on the island, the 2 outfalls that are in the area there, and that's been impactful of holding back the water going inland and then also letting some water out, and that's at 30th and the Forest Trails outfall that is in this project area. But there's more work to be done, and that's what we're here today. And I got 89 slides, as Douglas said, so no.
I started at 4, you took it to 89.
But we have there's been and I do have a lot of stuff, and I'm going to breeze through some stuff, but we've been working on this for 6-7 years, like he said. There's been a lot of study, a lot of engineering, a lot of what if we do this, what if we do that. We've looked at other alternatives and discounted them and gone away from them for certain things. But this all started with, yes, we're going to replace the pathway, and while we're replacing the pathway, can we do something to make it a multi-purpose project? And that is to increase flood mitigation, try to hold back the tides at the pathway. So we had our first study, and this is just a quick schematic starting, we've been studying from 20th Avenue all the way through 41st, actually past 41st, the pathway, and this was our first attempt, and it just looked at, and you could see each one of those shaded lines is 1 foot of elevation, so it's 5, 6, and 7 feet. So to get 5, 6, and 7 feet, we were looking at where along the pathway we needed to fill and bring that pathway up, and how hard that would be. Like if that's in front of your house and we've got to go up 2 feet, can we get a driveway up and over that? And what does it do to the drainage? And what does it do to the access? And so we studied that initially, and we gave our initial finding to the city was, looking at that, we think we could get to an elevation of 6. So, and again, I'll be talking, it's a little bit technical, but elevation 6 is on the, like our engineering datum. It's not on the tide datum, but that gets a significant protection above high tide. But, so we came up with a plan that would raise the pathway in certain areas. We would also have to put check valves on all the pipes that are going through that pipe, so the water can't come up in the drains and to come up on the other side of the pathway that we just raised. So we would have to do that. And then we presented that to the city, and we were moving forward with that. And then this shows kind of the area where, we are expecting improvement. The blue is the water that would have flooded in at elevation 6 and who it would have impacted. So you could see it's a lot of people, a lot of structures. And as we were moving forward on this project, in December of 23, we had that very big nor'easter that had a tide of 6.7. So then we realized, well, maybe it's not aggressive enough, because that's 0.7 of a foot above what we would have had. So we would have had flooding everywhere. Just so Douglas and the city and us, we kind of went back to the drawing board, and then we kind of knew this this golf course project was coming along, because we're working for Wild Dunes also, so we're playing both sides of the fence here. So, but we knew it was coming along, and we said, well, there's an opportunity to get a higher level of protection if we worked with the golf course. So then we went back, and we, and again, here's some of the just title information. So that tide was the 4th highest tide on record in December from the Charleston gauge, and we've been measuring Charleston tide since the late 1800s, so over 200 years or whatever. That was the 4th highest tide. So if we could protect above that, we're going to have a pretty stout system. So we're trying to get to 7, which is 0.3 of a foot above that tide from back in December of 2023. So, and that would raise, and this is a little bit of jargon, but it would raise the risk of the flood from a 25-year storm risk to a 100-year storm risk. So again, that's a huge increase in protection. So just going up that 1 foot gives us a lot of protection. So this is the area that's inundated by a 7-foot tide. So again, this is that 1 foot more tide. So you can see a lot more blue area interior to the island. And then, again, looking at if we did our project, and that we have exhibits here, and then we have exhibits to go through. But if we did our project, we moved some of the protection out on the golf course. So it's not at the path, it's out on the golf course. And that actually brought a lot of homes that were outside the protection to inside the protection, a lot of your homes. So a lot of your homes that were on the outside of the pathway, on the Intercoastal Waterway pathway side, are now, since we moved the protection onto the golf course area, it brought your homes within the barrier. So everybody's getting that 7 foot of protection, and this shows that, so this is before all this area floods, and then after, the flooding stays outside of that, and that's the intent of the project. So we have, a blow up, and this kind of shows the areas, and so it's a lot of little projects. It's kind of spread out, from 20th, 21st to past 41st, on the other side, behind the fire station. You know, again, we put a lot of money into the outfall on 41st, and that has done a good job of that 41st canal, if you will, keeping the tide out of that. But there's some areas that the water could go around it, so we need to plug up some areas over there. And then just moving from 41st back towards 21st, we have various project proposals of raising a path, putting a berm in. So it's a combined project now of the pathway and the golf course. And if those two projects are done in conjunction, we could get to the 7.0 protection. I'm not going to go through everyone unless, do you think I should go through everyone?
No questions, Gina. Okay.
Should I go through everyone?
I was just
I
going to say,
could.
could you clarify, because I think if you do the 7, you're not raising the pathway as high. And I think people prefer that not to be raised.
And yes, so, and so I could kind of, and then so I'll go back to what essentially the project is. So behind the fire station, we're doing what's called a little knee wall. So we're just having a little knee wall to like raise up that area to get to elevation 7 to make sure we don't have flooding coming in from the marina. So that'll be that. The 41st Street Canal already has a tide protection. That was the big project that was finished up earlier this year. And then beginning, here, we're doing a drainage improvement, and then we're just raising the actual cart path. So we're not raising the walking path, we're raising the cart path. So it's going to be on the golf course. That protection there is on the car. And then all of that protection, so from, and Doug, help me with these roads. So this one is the Sparrow. Yeah, Sparrow. And then, so that's, all that work is on the golf course. The pathway's not coming up. We are doing some drainage improvements because there's some bad flooding from rainwater. So we want to get more water off the Waterway Boulevard and Sparrow and some of the side roads, and then get it out into the golf course's drainage system. So, and again, moving past, and that's,
Duck, the next one?
yeah, the Duck Avenue. Again, we're on the golf course all the way through to the first sets of houses that are seaward of or towards the Intercoastal Waterway. And behind their houses, and this is one area that's not part of the project, right? So this area is planned, but it's not designed right now. So this area is going to be a gap until we could figure out, this is for future, and I don't know if you want to talk about this, Douglas, about this will be a future project with each individual owner about how to address the 7.0 protection.
So that's 3607.
I'm sorry, I can't, I don't have a perspective.
That's 3607 through 3615 Waterway.
Okay, thank you.
And that's really pretty close to Duck Lane.
Yeah, so Duck Lane, and then this is what we call the big outfall that we've been working on, that we call this the Forest Trail outfall, that we just put that big structure on. So that big structure has that tide control. So that's doing a good job there. And to get the protection up to 7, instead of doing it on the pathway, we're going to do it behind the houses. But again, there's no golf course property back there that we could have worked on. So we planned a raising that we would have to work with each one of those individual homeowners to close that off. Moving past that, in the area of that Forest Trail outfall, that big ditch or canal that comes out, we are going to have to raise the path. So that the pathway of the Waterway Boulevard pathway. Now, that pathway is going from like a 4 and 5 foot pathway to an 8 foot wide pathway. That's one of the big improvements of the pathway project itself. But we are raising the pathway to provide that barrier. So in that segment,
How high?
it's like 18 inches. It's like this tall.
And what area is that again?
Huh?
That's the 36th block?
Correct. That's,
Yeah.
that's the 36th Avenue outfall that was just done.
Yep. And the,
How long will how much of the pathway will be elevated, the 18 inches?
I mean, that's like 150 feet.
Okay, so
Yeah.
pretty short.
Yeah, yeah. And again, the roadside, we've got a curb section proposed, so there's actually gonna be a 6-inch curb. So that gets you up 6 or 8 inches, and then a little bit of a fill. There'll be I think we have a railing there. Maybe not. We do have a railing? Okay, it might not require a railing, but it is filled, and then it goes to just a, gentle slope. I mean, 18 inches and like 10 or 12 feet, you cannot really notice that. And then once it gets past the outfall,
Talking to Mike,
oh, I'm sorry.
and just, and I think you've said this already, Rick, but these parts of the project that are on the roadside are not gonna happen here immediately. They're a future phase, so, they're not part of the golf course work, so they're not happening kind of imminently.
Right.
They'll be, hopefully,
Very
this
soon.
winter.
Yeah, very soon, yeah. So yeah,
Just a quick question, just something to consider. With all of the software today and everything that's available, is it possible to put together a rendition similar to the house you're building today? You can see the picture of what you're doing. We're trying to explain all this to people for their particular home and what's being raised. I mean, to do a drive-by on a 3D going up and down from 41st to 21st, I would think would be pretty simple these days with software available. Just a suggestion to consider.
yep,
So people can see the picture and where the elevation is and what it's doing in their, just think about it.
okay, yep, understood.
If you got the design docs, I can't imagine.
Yeah, we've also talked about the idea of just having stakes put in the ground that are at elevation 7, so that you can, I mean, it seems as though a lot of the questions are, how far above the ground is this to help me visualize it, and physically, where is it? It would be very easy to just drive stakes in the line of the ribbon of land at the correct elevation. Right.
Excuse me, another quick question. We're fighting on the South Beach because you can't build a wall because it negatively impacts the ground. So if this is gonna be in phases, and there are people left out in holes, are they gonna have a negative impact until you get to the next phase? Or
no, I
is
mean,
that
again,
been thought through?
there, I mean, like, some areas are gonna be at a lower protection, so the pathway itself is gonna provide a level of 6.0 protection, so the pathway is coming up to 6 everywhere. So everyone that's this side, landward of the pathway is gonna be protected to elevation 6. So that protection is there until that 7 gets filled in. And so that was a requirement that when we worked with council on this, we didn't want to leave, like you said, a negative impact for people to experience while we try to get that 7, particularly with the individual homeowners that we had to work with. That might be several years to get that work done. So we wanted to have a level of protection for everybody. And there, it's a little bit different on Front Beach and stuff, because the wave action is so like, extreme. We're on the intercoastal waterway, and it's I'm not gonna say gradual, but it's just a rising tide. And we don't have this like huge wave action. So again, I do a little work on coastal areas where, if you put a wall here and somebody's floating here, you're not gonna wave into that next person. This is nothing like that. We're not concentrating the water on anybody else or anything like that.
It will go around the wall, but no matter how slow it comes.
Right, it will go around the wall, correct, but, so there's gonna be a level of protection, but it's not gonna be any different than it is now. So like, if they didn't have the protection, they're still not gonna have the protection, but we are getting 6 on the pathway, and then we're gonna fill in, there's 2 spots that we're leaving.
That we hope to fill in with the elevation 7, and that gives us complete back of the island protection of the elevation 7. And the people that are near those holes, they're in, Douglas has been working with them, and there's a lot of support for it, so we believe we could finish out the back of the island and have everybody will be eventually protected to elevation 7.
What happens for 130th? Does all that water just rush down there?
So,
Well, we're not done. Yeah, we're not done.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not done. So the project keeps moving. I'm going from 41st back towards 20th. So this is the 30th, or this is the, I call it Forest Trail outfall. The pathway, and you can see the green comes off and goes out onto the golf course. So then the project leaves the pathway and goes back out onto the golf course. So again, that's gonna be built first. The pathway is gonna be done second, but again, it's a combined system. It's a meshed together system, and we need the golf course and the pathway to go together, but it keeps going, so going farther, from 30th, there's already protection there, and I guess that's, what's this?
yeah, so that group of 4 houses are 3303 through 3401.
And so that is, and this project is inside, is within the golf course project as it is proposed today. And there's a cart path that goes behind those houses, and the plan is to raise that cart path with some type of landscape wall, and it would come up, and then those houses and everybody landward of them are protected to that 7.0 elevation. So the elevations on the fairway to this side is at elevation 7. The elevation behind the houses right now are below 7. We'll bring it up to 7, and then the project continues farther down. So, and then we have drainage that's designed into this. So we know if you raise that up, you're blocking drainage. So we put drainage in the project that has check valves. Again, like if you put that drainage in there and you don't put a check valve in there, the water just comes in that pipe and goes under your project. So we have pipes under there with check valves that keeps stormwater moving that way when it's raining. It keeps the tide from coming in when the tide's coming up.
So how does it keep the tide from coming in? Because it can't drain back in there because the tide's up. So where does
That's,
it drain?
well, so then if we get that combined tide, there's gonna be an issue. There's gonna be, so the tide will be up, the rain will be trying to go out, it can't go out.
Well, forget the rain. Let's just say the tide. How's any drainage where's it gonna take it? Because the marsh is raised. It can't put it anywhere. That's why it's overflowed.
Right, so there's a, what's called compound event. So if the tide is up and it's raining.
Forget the rain. Just say the tide comes up. You're saying there's a drain that's gonna drain it. Where's it?
No, the drain's there to drain the rain,
correct.
not the tide.
Not the tide. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So there's, at 2 locations, there's 2 pipes that is underneath it that lets the water go out, but it doesn't let the water come in. And we've installed those types of check valves across the island in many locations, they work great. So
And that's gonna be between our houses and the golf cart path? That's
it'll be,
right.
underneath the golf cart path, yes. And then, after we get past that set of houses, there's a section of golf course that we're gonna use their pathway, not our pathway, but the golf course pathway. That pathway is gonna be raised, and that's gonna provide the protection. In that segment also, there's, that floods pretty bad right now.
What
in a
area are we
rain-
at now?
In between
3201.
3201,
3109 and 3107.
Yep, that's the black jagged line at the top left. Those addresses.
Okay. So we haven't gotten to the actual golf course yet. The greens.
the
Yeah.
So so this is the cart path behind the houses. Cart path goes behind the houses, it's raised, there's two pipes that go out this way, and it keeps the tide from coming in here, but if we have rain, it lets the rainwater go out. Now, we have a problem when it tides up and it's raining, it's gonna flood. But it's not gonna flood any more than the tide would have, because we're keeping the tide out. Once we're past those houses, we're using the cart path, the golf course cart path, and we're raising it a little bit to get that 7-foot elevation all along there. So all that works on the golf course. The pathway is right along here on this side, and it's gonna be staying about the same, but it's gonna be widened, it's gonna be a big wide, and then in this area where there is rainfall driven flooding, we are putting more drainage in to take this water off of Waterway Boulevard and out to the marsh. That will have a check valve on it also. So when the tide is trying to come in here, we'll have a check valve right here where it can't come up in here.
So Rick, is this all of the Isle of Palms flood mitigation, or is part of what you're talking about what Wild Dunes is doing? Because behind my house, they've raised a lot of stuff over towards the water, and so are you combining the two?
So so for Wild Dunes, there's two things going on. There's one thing going on right now. They're doing a golf course renovation.
Yes.
They're renovating the golf course, greens and tees. There's some bringing in some field to bring some of the fairways up. I hear the irrigation is going to be upgraded. So we don't really, there's a golf course architect that did that. We helped them with the permitting side of, they have to have silt fence, and they have to make sure they're doing certain things for the environmental permit. We helped them with that. The interior stuff, we're really not involved in, so I don't have a great understanding. I just know they're taking it all up, they're taking the grass out, they're replanting the grass, and they're gonna have a whole new golf course. So on top of that, we have a set of plans that overlays what work they were gonna do that has our flood mitigation. And our
That's what
work,
you're talking about.
yeah, and I'm only talking about that, I'm not talking about any of their stuff. So yeah, I know they're probably tearing this all up, and then, the holes out here, they're tearing that all up. We're not talking about that.
Okay.
So,
Because they're raising it on the back, I'm wondering why you have to raise it again.
because there's a big creek that comes in right here.
Correct, so why didn't you put an outfall or a dam there like you did on 34th and 31st?
That's a very good observation, and that was our first thought. And environmental permitting by the state of South Carolina is very protective of the critical area of the marshes, and they, any manipulation of the critical area is very, they look at it very intently. And we have actually tried that. We have approached them on another project on Seabrook Island to close off a small tidal creek with a dam, if you will, and then it has enough gate to let the water come in on a normal tide, but then stop it on a higher high tide. And what we have found with them and where they've come down on is, if there's an existing obstruction there, like a road with some culverts or a golf course causeway or something, they'll let you use that to continue to block the tide, but you can't go in there and block up a new creek. And so that's what they consider that hole that's in between those two golf courses as a creek, as a tidal creek, and they don't want us blocking that up.
Even if we beg, it's just not a possibility at all.
It's just not, they just said, they just said, go.
So the other two areas aren't creeks, they're just sort of ditches.
That's right. And they don't have, all this area is marsh. So that creek is right there, and when that water comes in, this area fills up with salt water. And so they consider all this area as critical area, as, marsh, habitat, and
there's a whole program at the state, it's been incorporated into a new department at the DES, Department of Environmental Services. Their whole job is to protect that critical area. I mean, we have this whole thing with this wall on the beach. I mean, that's the same department that we had to go through, and that's their interpretation of the regulations right now, that we can't cause that big of an impact by blocking it off.
So that marsh also abuts the golf course. So do you know what Wild Dunes is doing about that mitigation there? Because
Well, they're just filling on top of their existing golf
they're just
course.
building the golf course up.
Yeah, but they're not filling out any past the existing edges of the golf course. They're not filling any new areas.
Okay.
They're just filling their golf course
They're
area.
raising that up like we want to raise the path behind it.
Correct, and they're facing the same problems that you guys are. Their fairway is too low, and on a high tide, it is getting inundated, so they want a more playable course. So they're gonna bring that up so they don't have to deal with those high tides as much.
Do you know the elevation that they're raising those fairways to?
About 2 feet. So, I mean, I think back there, like, I bet it's getting about the same elevation that we're looking at. I think it's probably 4 or 5 feet, and if they're going up 2 feet, so it's gonna be 6 or 7 feet.
So what logically.
No, it's not 6 or 7 feet. The elevation's already,
Yeah.
4 or 5 feet, and they're coming up that high.
So logically, wouldn't that help us? If they're already raising it, why do we need to raise here?
Because there's that hole that we just let all the water.
It won't let it on them?
Well, they'll be above it. They'll be surrounded by, they're creating their golf course that goes out here, those holes that go out here, they're on call it an isthmus.
Yeah.
So they got the intercoastal on one side, and they have the marsh on the other side, so they just have water on both sides. And they're just filling it up.
So it's
But
gonna
but
flow to us.
it still goes around them through that big creek. So that would have been the easy fix. I mean, Doug, we looked at that very early, and we had that experience with Seabrook, and we knew that was really not an option without a huge fight. I mean, it would be a big fight. So moving on to what road is this, Douglas?
I think that's 32nd, right?
32nd.
Yeah, we're right at 30 seconds.
So 32nd, this is another, oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
Do you want to zoom in?
See, it does-
Well, that's the 30th outfall.
Yep. See,
This is the
This is
32nd. So the homes
beginning at 32nd. This is another
section
of
of,
the project that's not included in the golf course project.
so again, this is all,
Golf course project work, the 3 homes, here, just
yeah, the 3 homes here,
don't, there's no golf course property behind it. They abut right up on this creek or the critical area, the marsh.
so
The plan would be to work with these 3 homeowners to build up their seawall or berm off that on their property, because again, we don't have any property to do this on, and then connect it up with the overall system, and then 7 on this side, 7 on this side. They would fill in here, and then we'll have 7 across the island.
So that's the Furlano's property, the green line is meeting the black line, so a bit of that is on the golf course property, a little bit is on the private property. That's the Bland's house,
Yeah.
at the end 3201,
And there's C1 behind it.
and then,
It's the new
yeah,
owner.
yeah, in the middle there is,
Mr. Vaughn.
and the Bland's property has a private, wall
Wall.
on the back, and then along the right, it then would join back in with the golf course project.
And so from the Furlanos,
Down towards 41st, and
that's where the berm would be entirely.
on the golf course property. Ready for the next page?
Yeah.
Toward 21st.
Yes, I'm sorry, towards, yeah, from the Furlano's towards 21st.
To the right, that's actually. Okay. Right. Yeah.
We're the next house.
Yeah.
But where is it?
So this is 30th Street, and this is the outfall, this is the Brights. And then this is 32nd,
That's 31. I think that's the.
31st.
Yeah, we have a couple more beyond that.
Yeah, okay. So again, this is where, there's those three houses that would have to have the wall on their property. And then we were planning a berm this is on golf course property, a berm that ties in here and then uses the golf course path to raise this up and again, achieve that 7-foot elevation. Now, do we want to throw the curveball in or?
Pushing it potentially out. Well, and I guess I would say that we're kind of constantly talking.
About if, and we can get to this, if we cannot get
100%
participation on this project,
we're constantly thinking about what the plan B would be. And I think that the first thing we would investigate as plan B would be to try to connect it back over the Carter Way.
So, this is the plan right now. We have construction plans. We have a price on, we're ready to work with them to get this done. If we can't get, I guess, cooperation or something, we likely abandon this section or some of it and then move to another alternative. But that's not right now.
Rick, the green line, is that the Wild Dunes line? Is that?
That's the Wild Dunes line. So,
Wild Dunes is already planning on doing, all green is Wild Dunes construction?
no, but in this section, yes. In this map here.
So the color code doesn't, the green, the black, the blue, purple, is there significance on whose is whose?
It's actually the type of, like what, this is just a berm, dark green. The solid green is just a landscape berm. No path. This green with gray in the middle is a path elevation. So it's just showing what kind of protection we're proposing. So this is the path, we're elevating the pathway, and just grading it in. That's going to provide the protection. This is a landscape berm. Those black diamonds, that's a wall. We were saying there's going to be a wall built there.
So the path would be elevated there, similar to what you said earlier.
Yep.
Raised with check valves through or whatever.
Yes, yeah, we actually are doing some drainage improvement here, like we were worried about, again, blocking more water here, so we have a drainage plan here, and we're tying that in to our system over here that's outside the check valve, so we would have a check valve. Yes.
But not on people's property.
No, it's all on the golf.
And I think this is we have more slides on the project, but I think the Brights are the farthest west, the closest to 21st.
Close to was there, 3001, but my concern is watching. The berm sounds good, it looks good. The problem we've got with is the drainage ditch, they'll put a vent, and we call them a vent. We just flooded our house twice, we shall finish that project. I'm talking about 4 inches in the basement of our house. And it's up to the pipe. The vent, right where my playing green used to be, we just went right, we flooded down their house at 3007. I mean, that's an issue, and that was the last minute thing. You told us it was a mistake, we had to cut a hole in this pipe, and I don't know why you would do that.
When you came in and you put 3 huge pipes that run all the water out, well, for some reason, you bored holes in the top of these pipes and put grids in there. And all the water comes out of those and goes in our backyard and into our garage. So QE told us it was a mistake. It was an architectural mistake, and they had to fix it. So it's not fixed. So all the water is going to go behind that. But I mean, our yard in the back now is like a lake where we used to never get any water in our backyard.
I'm at December 2023, we got all the way down to your house.
It got down to their house.
They're 4 houses down, 150 yards down the fairway from us, it's coming right up through that fence, or inlet, whatever, and going right down through the first 4 houses down there. The timing, and I think that issue as well.
We want to know why they bored a hole
system, you know. You got the gates out there and block the water from coming in, they never play.
So the gates, so
The gate never closed.
So here's the valves are here. The check valves are actually on the street. The gates are here are supposed to be open all the time because they're meant for maintenance. And then this inlet that you're talking about here was put here to make sure you guys have positive drainage when the tide's not up. We wanted to make sure the water got out of your backyard if it's raining.
Excuse me, but there's a underground drainage creek that runs from behind your house that goes all the way to the 30th, and it's still been backing up. And could that be the same?
Well, this came on the high tide we had in December 2022.
Yeah,
I mean, the
I
water
mean,
was
it's
coming
the
through
same
there.
tide that floods our yards.
Exactly.
Yeah, so this-
From ours.
So this entire project is, the purpose of that is to stop what happened in December. And really, the December storm is the storm that we lost, and I don't know the final count, but we lost hundreds of cars under people's houses because this project wasn't in place. And that is the ultimate goal of this project, is to stop those high tides. So that December storm, that tide was just below 7 feet. So it would make sense that the water got into and under probably all of your houses. And that's what this project will stop.
And
This is,
No impact on that.
that's an old creek, excuse me.
In that pipe. It's going to have no impact whatsoever.
Well, so you can see the Brights have the red line. So actually, for your property, you're right, it almost doesn't, this project would almost have no benefit except for it would come around, it would come around the right side of the berm. So it would still get under your house.
But
But
wouldn't
you have
Wild
natural grade
Dunes,
that's very close to 7 feet.
wouldn't Wild Dunes have the obligation to fix that creek that exists now?
Backing up now with 3 inches.
So that's the existing,
this pipe,
golf course drainage.
this pipe back here,
Yes. Yes.
yeah. Well, we are
doing
a larger system to handle everybody's drainage in here that's separate from the golf course. So we added that to the
project where we're running a new pipe
here.
and out to here.
Why are you stopping it before it gets to our house?
So, and I don't know that we've ever said this in this meeting, but there are most of the portions between 21st and 41st, the natural ground is already above 7 feet. So if it's naturally above 7 feet, there's no reason to raise it at all. So what I was saying is the berm at the back of your house is naturally already above 7. So that's where the path ends, is when it naturally is already at 7. We're then continuing a straight line that continues that 7-foot elevation all the way towards 41st to the back of the Blaine's house. So most of your backyard is already at 7 feet. Well, that's that red
Well,
line, I don't know if you can see that.
What you're not addressing
Never
is
flooded until you filled it in that ditch.
Well, so we do hear a lot, and Rick started with this, that December storm. there
It's
was
the fourth highest ever.
water. A lot of people say that same exact thing. We have not had this prior to that event, but that was a unique event.
I solution. I think we just need to move the check valves.
That makes sense.
Because that's so low, right there, that's below the berm by about 3 feet, where it bubbles up out of there.
Again, we did this, I guess not with this project in mind, so now that the protection was on the pathway, and now it's out here. So if we pull the check valves from here, we'd have to talk with them to see if we could retrofit them to move them to there. But reaffirm on the inside.
Or have a check valve on,
Their specific pipe, right?
Yes.
Well, you need to come see what they did, like, where they put these where they bored holes in these pipes that y'all put in the ground. They came and bored holes in the top of them. Well, all the water doesn't go out, it comes up, because there's a hole there. And it's worse. And I think somebody needs to come look at this, because it's.
Does it come up in tides other than the December tide, any, spring tide, any?
Not any, but
king tide, it bubbles out of the tide.
it bubbles up. It just bubbles right out. But if you're gonna put these pipes in, why would you bore a hole in the top of them? That makes no sense to either, no.
Rick, was that to add an inlet at their?
Backyard.
After the plans were made, they came in and bored 2 holes into those pipes, and now water comes up out of them. Question?
Well,
I have a question.
yeah,
There are 2 drains, one in Allen's place and ours, that come off the golf course. No check valves in it. Golf course is about 2 feet higher than our backyard. Every tide. Every high tide, water comes up, no grass grows. So are they gonna take those out? Because
That's
they're
what I
on,
was asking.
they're on the house side of the berm. Right. Those are gonna come out.
That is,
As it currently is planned, we are running a new drain line independent of the golf course that is, on the house side of the berm. That is to collect all that water and then it will bring it over here and we'll have a check valve on it. Okay.
And I think we also expect that the golf course would need to do a new system on that side of the berm as well.
On their side, yeah, they're doing something over there too. Yeah.
That's where these problems are coming from right now. That used to be an actual creek. When Wild Dunes covered it over probably about 1992. And they put in the opening in front of your house or behind your house and behind the sticks in ours.
So that
It
drainage,
was an actual creek.
there should be, we know there would at least be one brand new system, which would be the cities on this side of the berm. We expect that there would also be an additional drain system on the golf course side. And they've acknowledged that, Brenda, they've told you that they have this drainage system that they haven't been maintaining over the years, and it's, yeah, so that system.
We'll never
would get- Yeah, that system would get fixed. Yeah, that's the.
Golf course.
Explains why they wanna be held harmless.
Yeah.
Well, if we don't have any,
I think you have other slides going.
I mean, yeah, there's more that goes that way, but it's just minor stuff. That's
the major.
part of it.
so I guess let's talk about the, kind of the process that's gotten us to where we are today. Is the city has been working with Wild Dunes as a single owner, and we've been progressing these plans along with them throughout, working through this process. We've had meeting after meeting after meeting, coordinating where would the berm go, what would the drainage system be. So we've been kind of progressing down this path of getting this project done. And city council authorized the money to be spent on the project. That then triggered the need to execute an actual contract for the construction in an MOU to get the work physically done. So this is very late into the contractor has already started work, they're on site. We're kind of plugging along thinking that we're in good when it came time for the signature to happen, it went to their ownership group, and that was the first that we had heard that they had concerns about
their liability. The city, gave a lot of examples of drainage systems that run through drainage easements that are on people's private property. I am unaware of the property owner ever being sued for a city project. If it's a city project, the city, it's through an easement. I don't know that anybody would necessarily sue the property owner who just gave permission to allow their property to be crossed. But they were concerned enough that they said, in order for us to give you permission to do this, we would need a hold harmless for each abutting property. So we got that very much here in recent, within the last month or so, we've learned this. And we've been trying to come up with the lawyers have been negotiating through what would make them comfortable that they are not exposing themselves to any new risk. And this is what we got back from their attorneys, was this hold harmless agreement. So that's what started the city contacting each of you saying, we'd like to do this project. It's important to the city. It is an opportunity. They agreed to allow it to happen on their property, but out of their concern about, adding any risk that they don't currently have, they've requested these documents. So that has generated, we put those documents together. They went out to, I think, everyone in the room via mail last week. I understand, it sounds like nobody, interestingly, the only one that I've physically gotten back is one that got mailed to Texas. That one came back in a matter of days. I don't know that anybody has physically received in the mail.
We haven't gotten nothing.
So, I have those electronically. I can email each one of you your documents for your specific property. There's nothing magic about the ones that were mailed to you. They're just printed copies of what we have already.
Unless you have something we could sign today.
Yes, and if you're, the agreements need to be witnessed and notarized. City Hall has, we have both, so we can print them for you, we can witness them, we can notarize them. And we can, help you in any way that we can to get those done.
Is there a cutoff date?
So there is not we have been asking, so to kind of back up on the timing. Obviously, their work and their contractor is well underway. They have indicated, Wild Dunes has indicated to us that once their work is complete in that area, they do not want the city to go back in and disrupt all of their brand new work. We've asked them, because initially they told us that this work would need to happen on the front end of their work. Again, they've been very agreeable, and they said, hey, we can do it at the tail end of what's happening out there now. We've been trying to get from them a schedule of what is the final drop dead day. We haven't been given that day, but we think that they're going to have grass growing in August. So that, if you back that up, we have to first got all of the agreements back. We have to sign a contract with the contractor, and they have to have done the work all by August. So it's a very compressed timeline, which is why we're trying to get this done kind of as quickly as we can.
How long will the work physically take? Do you have a guess?
Well,
In that stretch, right
Yeah,
there?
the berm itself and the valves under the berm, I think that would be done in a matter of a couple of weeks. They will be, I know that they're leaving the paving of the path, so the very last thing.
Okay.
So there will be bits and pieces done after the berm is done, but I think the physical berm will be just a matter of a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, what is eminent domain? Why do you have to have their permission to do this?
Well, yeah, the process of condemning the property or taking the property would be years, very costly.
Okay.
Yeah,
That answers my question.
yeah.
Okay.
Not a quick process.
Not an easy.
It seems like the property owners, all of us here, we're the ones taking the risk. Because if something goes wrong, like it did on the prior project, where, you know, and we signed a release, we can't go back to Wild Dunes, you might have a whole bunch of people suing Isle Falls. You know, if we're still flooding, and, I mean, I'm just saying, and it seems like we're pretty late at the table to find out about this project, and all of a sudden we have to make an immediate decision and sign off, and we really don't know what we're signing off for. I mean,
Well, you know, and not to coach anybody how to sue anybody, I'm not a lawyer to obviously do that, but what the release is doing is only promising that you're not gonna sue Wild
Wild
Dunes.
Dunes, right.
I don't want to encourage anybody to sue the city. I don't think that anybody would have the need to sue the city. We have professional engineers designing the project. We'll have professional contractors building the project. Generally, the project is entirely, the purpose of the project is to protect each of your properties. I mean, that is it's the only reason the project's being done. If the project were done and there was a problem with the project, with the drain, you know, the drains aren't working, the water's not getting out, the city will work through that and make it a functioning system. The city also doesn't want a system, if we were to put something in, it didn't work, it's having adverse consequences, we would take it out. But at the end of the day,
Happened with us.
It's already happening.
well, this is the first
It's
I've
done for us.
never heard of that pipe bubbling up until this.
And I'd like to address, just real quick. There was an open ditch next to your house. There was an open ditch that was connected to the tide. The tide, if this project wasn't in December, 2023 happened, same thing would happen. Exact same, because the tide would have come up that ditch, gone into your backyard, and gone into your garage. This project's tide control is located on the street side of your house, not on the back side of your house. And that was again, when we did this project 5 years ago, that was the purpose. Hearing this, I think there's some stuff we could do as part of this project to retrofit that a little bit and see if we could address that and put you guys on the correct side of the tide protection.
So that was a mistake.
No, it was an intentional design. We wanted to fix the tide at the pathway. That was the design intent.
I understand them being there, but cutting a hole in the pipe, they're not good to stay. They came and said, we gotta do this.
Your yard, if they,
I'm an engineer, but I know a hole in that pipe cannot be good for anybody.
if they didn't do that, your yard would hold water when it rains. And the entire purpose is when,
Site conditions change, you don't always have the picture. They saw that where there's
going to be a low spot there. We want your yard to drain. When it's raining, we want your yard to go into that inlet. If that inlet wasn't there would be a wet spot there.
So it was designed for your drainage, however, on a flip tide, on a high tide, it floods you, right?
Yeah.
I've never had water in my yard.
We never
Right.
had, yeah.
Yeah, there's like 4 of us that do. The Brights didn't, the Rist Millers didn't, and then it started with the Novaks, and then us, the Sticks, and then the Bellows, and then the house next door to the Bellows. But they're never there, so they probably don't know how badly it floods. But especially the Novaks, the Sticks, and the Bellows, I mean, we get water up to our lower back porch, and we're elevated, we have a,
So at a king tide, that's a king tide, you're getting it.
or a very heavy rain.
Or a
Very-
combination of a king tide and a 3-inch rain. It's, ever since we've lived there, we've gotten flooding, but that's just the way it is. I don't want to sound paranoid, but I think maybe that the city does care about our concerns, but I seriously doubt that Wild Dunes does. So I'm worried about signing something leaving them unresponsive. Since of course, by the time we know whether this is really successful or not, Wild Dunes will have another owner.
But as you pointed out, right, the option is that the city is performing the work. I had the same exact question, so just to reiterate, the answer is the city is doing the project, the city's ultimately responsible. Wild Dunes isn't only contributing their ground, allowing us, right?
That's
So they really wouldn't be responsible anyway, legally, doesn't feel like, since they're not performing the work, right?
Yeah, it's very, so this, I mean, to give the example of the Brights property, that pipe is on a drainage easement, but on land owned by Yule. So this is the same exact situation. If your neighbor had a problem with that work, I don't think it would be their default to sue you for that work, because it's technically on your property in a drainage easement. So that is what the hold harmless would do. It's gonna say, if we have issue, we're not gonna sue the Brights, given that their property is just allowing the pipes to be on their property.
Excuse me. The problem with I asked for Wild Dunes to have a representative here to explain their intention on the contract. They refused, okay? When they say the flood mitigation work, in quotes, they don't have an exhibit attached to that. Okay, so I'm just thinking common sense. They are doing major flood mitigation work on their golf course, okay? So if this doesn't work, and we sue the city can say, it's the work they did out there. And we will be in court for 32 years fighting a city. We're also giving up in perpetuity for the rest of the life of this land any right to Wild Dunes. And we don't know what Wild Dunes is doing back there, or how it's going to impact us. We just don't. I don't see how anybody could sign it. I really don't. Unless we get an attorney and the Wild Dunes attorney attach an exhibit stating exactly what they mean by that and what they are doing back there, because they're doing tools for flood mitigation. They are.
We could certainly ask that, and again, I think we started with this, that Wild Dunes is agreeable to giving permission. I don't think that they are in a position that they want to pay their lawyers hourly rate to come and answer questions ad nauseum, but I think your point is a good one, and I think that we could certainly ask. And I think the language says there is city work that will result from their permission.
It says cause, it doesn't say allow. I don't understand that either.
And then they put flood mitigation work in quotes, which is the same exact language that's on the plans. And I think we can ask them, do you mind tying the plans? So I think that's a very fair.
And cause, what's the meaning of cause? The term.
I mean, we're certainly going to ask that, and we're going to have a fair amount of kind of follow-up, and that's a good question. Can they tie their release to just the city's work and not, in any fair reading of the release, have that tied to work that's being done 300 feet away.
That's fine for Dr. Doug. We have a planning or zoning department, I don't know what it is, but did Wild Goose get permission to raise the kayak race? Because I would think that they have to. So when our president, Mr. Mims or something, what's the guy's name? Did they come to us as a city? They're an entity. They're a homeowner, but they're an entity. Did they get permission to raise?
I mean, they don't, I mean, it's, they're not changing the land use, they're not changing, whatever, so I don't think they have to go through well, right, which is part of. Land disturbance. They got a land disturbance.
You don't have to do an elevation, like I could raise my property 20 feet and negatively impact the neighbors.
Well, I mean, like, are they negatively impacting
Well,
you?
we don't know yet.
I would think that
I don't
Wild
think they have to
Goose,
get permission to do that.
yeah, I would think they would be more liable for aggressively raising their property adjacent to ours and us having additional flooding.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And
And,
we're giving up all
And
rights
so
to
if they
see
don't,
that.
if they don't permit the flood mitigation work, they're more liable than if they do.
Yeah.
and to answer a question that came up, they are separate. So they have their plan on remediating the course or renovating the course. And then we have several sheets that shows the flood mitigation work that goes over the top of that. So it is a separate
So it would be-
document.
It should be very simple to just add that document to the document.
Yes.
And that way, if there is a problem down the line,
Yeah, they said, this is not the problem, but that's the problem, and
Yes.
that's a wild
engineers
Right.
can look at that and
There
say,
you go.
oh, the problem's coming from this set of plans versus that set of plans. And that should hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an easy tie together with this project and the title on those plans and that work that gets done by the city according to those plans and just other work that they're doing.
And can you find out the answer for me if they've gotten permission to elevate?
Yeah, I think that they do, but we can certainly
Thank you.
verify that.
I'll just make one other point. We were talking a minute ago that if this doesn't work, we can go back on Wild Dunes and we sign this and we go back on the town or sue or whatever. When we had the issues during the construction there and we were talking about and did bring suit, the person from Isle of Bonds, we had nothing to do with it. I mean,
Well,
That's
exactly what you said. That's what
It's
said.
not our
It's
fault,
not
we
our
had
problem.
nothing to do with it.
So,
well, so in that situation, it was the performance of the work, as I understand it, and specifically breaking up the bridge that was there.
No, it
well,
was
it's
pumping out
groundwater
groundwater,
is a lot, I think the majority of it.
doing a lot of it.
But in that situation, there are licensed, insured contractors doing the work. We are certainly part of that suit, but also the contractor is part of that suit.
But you
So that-
hired the contractor.
Right. Yeah. So,
And you
but
have-
that's another.
every construction defect case, you hire every single person who's touched, everyone who's touched the property gets sued. I mean, I hate to say this, Thomas Hutton knows this very well. You know, the caption is full of everybody that's been on the project, good or bad.
Yeah, and that is what Wild Dunes is saying. If there's a situation like that, we just want to be out of that suit. And again, back to your example, I don't know that any part of the work that was done is technically, that is a half and half drainage easement. I don't think your attorneys advise that you would sue the property owner, the other property owner, because it's running across their property. It's not the common, you would generally go after the person. Yeah, so that's,
So in this case, we wouldn't sue the city either. We'd sue the.
well, the Brights case brings the city into that suit. The
But you
the
said
city,
we had nothing to do with it. That was the city's response. We are not responsible, we had nothing to do with it.
well, when it comes to the drainage work, and you've mentioned the drainage work now here, and you mentioned the drainage work then, and we made modifications to suit your requests of picking up that,
Request that modification. QE did it.
okay. So, the request was made to facilitate getting that water out, we responded to that. This is, you know, you're,
We didn't see an issue
It's ongoing litigation.
yes,
forever.
Forever, 3 years,
yeah.
3 years. Yes. So, we've been in it for 3 years. 3
Yep.
long years.
Yep.
Again, one final, I got an email from Kara Wellington and Philip Sexton at the Flooding and Public Works Coordinator. Are you, I have no idea.
That is a county task force. They're working for,
An email that said, this was in December 2024. The city of Isle Palm stated that all pipes and ditches adjacent to 1303 waterway have been cleaned and inspected by the city, and the flooding that is referred to is on the Wild Dunes Golf Course private property. I sent them back an email, said that's not my address, and they said, thank you for following up. We have contacted the superintendent for the harbor course for Wild Dunes to discuss these issues, and we will be sure to reach back out to you. So that was December 2024. I emailed them a couple of times. I have no idea where they are.
So that is a countywide task force.
so I guess you contacted them.
Not, I don't know who they are.
So that, and maybe that, maybe they,
I don't even know how they got me, and that's not my address.
so maybe they were responding to, they got the wrong owner of that property, I assume. But that's a countywide task force.
So should we be contacting them?
So they will do the work of researching who the proper authority is on the system you're calling about. And it sounds like they determined that the system behind your house is a private system.
They determined it was the Wild Dunes Harbor Golf Course, and they won't talk to them.
Right.
I think we're not supposed to talk to them.
You could talk to Wild Dunes.
Thank you for all this.
So, we would love to get questions in terms of, you know, we have Brenda's question about the language in the release. Any other questions? Happy to kind of return responses back, work on responses.
I know it's not what you're talking about this very second, but all the water, as it has in the past, came from Wild Dunes originally, floated on down, it made our into the area, subject to being flooded, and what's gonna happen with 30th down to 21st? I mean,
So-
that water is gonna go somewhere.
I incorrectly said there weren't owners from west of this point, and so I do think we have.
I mean, the majority of that work is just tide control and internal drainage work.
Yeah,
So we're really not, like past 30th, there's really no like bar. Natural elevation 7 to that area, the rest of that project area. And so there's some areas that we're adding drainage to that are tying into existing drainage systems. And then all the existing drainage pipes that go out to the intercoastal waterway, we are going to be adding check valves to all of them. So all those pipe systems will not bubble up.
your property is between 22nd and 23rd. So, as Rick has mentioned, there is drainage work to catch rainwater being added to 22nd and 23rd. And there are check valves, I think they may have placed
Yeah.
in the Whispering Palm system, I could be wrong about that. But the issue at your corner is rainwater, more so than it is the backflow of water. But there are drainage projects incorporated into the plans to help with the issues around your property.
Is that on the first phase?
No,
Is that
that's the
down
second, that's the next phase.
So when does that happen?
Planned for this upcoming winter. And that's a project that, We have.
Now, Syria, we have to get serious on it.
We have, those plans are being developed and finalized. I think they're also kind of hinged on, they're still counting on part of the project being done with the golf course work. So, you know, the dominoes start to fall once a plan is firmly in place and underway. And so this is kind of the first step of starting that. So, to answer your question, would be plan for next.
We live at 3105, which is. The front of our house along the road was gonna have a,
No, that was the initial, that was the plan before it went to 7.
When it was 6, the protection was on the road side of your property. When it went to 7, it went to the back side of your property.
You're still planning a renovation of that site. Will that cause any increase in elevation?
Just walk. Going to be some just minor grading. There's a 5-foot wide path. It's going to 8.
Gonna be 20 years ago, transportation resurfaced Waterway Boulevard. They increased the roadbed height by about 4 inches, repoured the driveway aprons, and now the driveway apron slopes backwards. It actually makes where the sidewalk is about the low spot. But if you increase that any, our driveways are gonna flow towards our garages.
Yeah, and it's gonna hold it in there, for sure.
ours already is like that. Ours already goes down like that.
So I don't think you can raise in front of our houses, because it's gonna make us a moat. For sure.
Yeah, I think
I don't think they are.
Well,
Yeah,
that's-
You said minimal.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's just, I mean, again, very tricky situation. I mean, I get you. Well, no, it is a very, I mean, we don't want to aggravate or cause anything. Again, so, you know, we're trying to do a pathway project that's going from 5 feet, you know, taking an old path and making it a nice,
Yeah, but
tem-
one of the things is prohibiting us from signing that the way they've written it. So unless they can change their tunes at the last minute, and then we're given with a threat that they're gonna raise in front of us and it's gonna help you. This is really, it would be like saying you're gonna put a wall on the Manhood side of Ocean Boulevard, and just like the Ocean Boulevard, the beach owners, because you're gonna protect the interior of the island. That is not for any resident, protect the interior of this island and detriment these groups, or put us under pressure to sign an in perpetuity forever on our properties to well-being for these civilians.
Wouldn't do that.
Yeah,
No,
well,
They
they
don't-
would do that. The city would.
They would say, Owl Palms, would you please enclose these people?
Yeah, the city's gonna do that, or that's what they threatened. Yeah. Proposed, not threatened,
I
proposed.
think it's a mix and match. It was, the path was,
At 6.
That's-
The old plan, I think,
Or-
Brenda, you're referencing the old plan of elevating the path to 6, I think.
Anything, when I called you originally back in last summer, I said, I ran into Jan Anderson, she said you're elevating in front of my house 7 feet, not to 7 feet. I said, what am I, a helicopter? And you explained to me that most of that was gonna be down at 41st, and then in front of my house, it might be an inch. So that's what was told to me last summer, August, September, I got emails. So I'm okay with an inch. I'm still down. But to raise it 18 inches, or 2 feet, and I said, no, we're going up, and it's gonna put us in the moat. It's just as uncomfortable.
Yeah, so,
I'm 30, 13.
yeah. So I think definitely our plan A is to put the protection on the backside of your houses and get it to 7, and, I mean, that's,
yeah, we're good with that.
But you have to sign this document to do that.
We're not gonna sign it, I'm not signing it.
I mean, that's the problem, is we went all the way down this road, the primrose path of being told that Wild Dude was gonna be amenable to this and help us out, and it was great. And then in February, they said, but they would only do it if we got all the owners to sign. So that's,
How many owners are
it's
there?
unfortunate.
I think there's about 13 in this stretch, which seems to be, the majority of the people here. There are two other, well, there's actually three other kind of holes. One is 4, another one's 5, and one is 2. I think total it's right at 20. But I think in your stretch, it's 13, 15, something like that.
Plus the fact that if Rick, he's very nice and kind to present all this, but he doesn't even know exactly what they're doing. How do we know what we're doing is really good with what they're doing? I mean, I'm just not convinced of the competence of all of this, really, without seeing the mistakes on their property, and, I'm just not really convinced. We don't know exactly what Walden's doing, we don't know how that's gonna impact us. There's just so many unknowns that y'all are asking us to give up liability, and it could all be worse for us. We really don't know.
But
Well-
isn't Waldoons moving forward anyway, so
They
shouldn't we?
are.
But
They're
shouldn't,
doing what they're doing.
but
Right.
so shouldn't we like protect our homes with?
Yeah, Brett,
I would do anything to
I
keep
don't
that,
even know
we
what-
had
I'm
a foot
tired
of
of
water
it.
in
I don't
December
know
of
what they're doing.
2023.
well, but it can't be worse for us, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yes, it could.
How would it
If we
be?
don't put that berm up, how is it, how would it be worse?
I'm not an engineer.
Logically, we have all this work behind, and you block it. I don't know how that would work.
It is solely designed to stop water from getting under the house. That is the
And if
only.
Wild Dunes raises their fairways, which they have, that is gonna block these high tide events as well. Now, maybe if they have a really heavy rain, could it run towards the berm? But the berm should stop it there as well, right, because it's elevated.
Are they higher than the berm?
Yeah, and there's drainage, hopefully, building, am I right?
The water that's coming, the water we're protecting from is tidal water. Regardless of the runoff of it's all just rising tide, which Rick showed a chart as to, we know to within, an inch of where that water comes to at each tide. And that's what we're protecting against. We're not, if there's slopes here and there that catches, that's all well and good. But the purpose of this project is to stop the tidal water from getting into your backyard.
I mean, it's one of the big, it seems to me like one of the big clarifications, and I think Katie brought it up. There's an exhibit that essentially says, this is the work that you're basically protecting against.
Right.
I mean, there
We're
needs
gonna-
to be more detail in the agreement.
Yeah, we can certainly ask for that clarification. I don't know what their response would be, I don't know.
It'd be
There's
easy to
not- I
say
mean, at
as
the end of the
per
day, there's-
Plan number, blah, blah.
Yeah, sheet, such
sheet
as a,
number, whatever.
yeah.
I mean, you gotta be, hopefully we know who's doing what, on the spec, and the specs.
Yes.
And who's paying for what.
Yes,
So,
very
if
much
we know
yes.
that, attorneys are pretty good at translating
Yeah.
to an exhibit.
Yeah, I would suspect they'll be okay with it. That's been, what they've indicated that they want the release from the beginning of them mentioning the release. So I think they would do that. I just don't know, there really is nothing in this project for them. So they've been a great partner to agree to allowing it to happen. But there probably is an extent to which their willingness to hire attorneys, get their people involved with helping the city to do this project. I'm sure there's a limit to their goodwill to doing this.
So not to be suspicious, but I am, the benefit to them is having us hire them for this amount of work.
Well, they have,
That's a big benefit to them,
yeah, they have made it clear that it's only for the work that we do, so I think.
not in their contract.
We'll ask for that.
It's on their property. It's on the golf course property.
Right.
So
Right.
that's why they have the right to ask for it.
They have the right to ask, but that's a big benefit to them. We will lease to them for the rest of the life of our land.
For the work associated with
Flood mitigation, not for like,
That's what we're saying, we'll have a document, and I mean, honestly, there is, if you're looking, you could possibly sue at some point. any of you sign this document, the people that are doing the actual work are the liable parties. So there are, just because you can't see Wild Dunes, doesn't mean that there's not avenues of redress via litigation, such as whoever the contractor is, engineers, the city. I mean, those are the people that are doing the work.
I don't wanna sue anybody, I just wanna be
But
convinced
that,
that it's the right
but
thing.
the only reason that you want the ability to sue someone in case something goes wrong and it can't be fixed. That's the reason why litigation is there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that this is not giving away, completely giving away the ability
Yeah,
to
we
sue.
sue the contractor and it's on the property.
It's just getting Wild Dunes out of that lawsuit, which. And that's what they want in exchange for using their property. I mean, that's.
Douglas, you.
Certainly ask
Like maybe as per documents X and Y or land number, something.
Yep.
There is a very, that question was posed, there's a lot less space to work with if this was to be done on individual properties. It would have to be walls as opposed to berms because of space, right? And that becomes incredibly more costly.
And put flood mitigating plants on a berm.
So flood mitigating plants aren't gonna stop high
On a
tides.
berm, on our property,
But
on my
they,
property.
plants will not, and I don't
It
know.
helps, it doesn't stop it.
help.
But put a berm with flood mitigating plants on my property and leave all things out of there.
So I don't know the will of the group,
Right.
and it would clearly be
Yeah,
significantly more complex to work through 19 different owners versus one.
you're working through 19 right now, and I'm not gonna sign it, I can tell you that right now, not unless I get real clarity on what you're doing.
I don't know if there are others that would prefer this work to be done.
On your property. No, we don't have much of a backyard structure. I know if it was, if I had the choice of it being
Where you own.
whatever it is.
Yeah, it's on our property.
I know, every time.
So our next step is we would like for all of you that are willing and able to sign the release, to sign those, to give them to us. I haven't mentioned, and Rick made, asked the question earlier, if they were to sign something, give it back to us, and the project ends up not happening, what would happen with those releases? And they would not be recorded and returned to the board. They'd be nullified if the work doesn't happen. So we would ask all of those willing and able to give the releases. We will try to get, anybody that has any detailed question, I have one from Brenda about the language of the release. Yes.
So I guess if we signed one today, would we then modify to make it the same? In other words, if you modify some because of the
Well, if
language,
there's a change
then
in the
we
exhibit, so
would maybe re-execute.
we get, yeah, we do another, they do it different.
Okay, all right.
I think if it was just adding.
Try to keep it rolling.
It would be okay.
If you don't get all of us to sign, are we automatically going to go with Plan B that takes it further out into the?
Well, so we will, we'll just have to analyze, each property, a lot of you are very similar, kind of in the middle there, but depending on who is and who isn't willing to sign, will drive what alternatives we look at.
So, one other question was, the second alternative is gonna be way out of the golf course, right? So aren't they gonna ask us to sign something? Yeah.
31 of the trees and
The other, if you all don't sign, they're not, Wild Dunes is done, the golf course will be done, and it'll be up to the city to try to deal with the flooding.
So they won't go out.
I thought.
Katie, I don't know if you're in,
But there won't be a master
There could be an alternative. It hasn't been designed, it hasn't been conceptualized, it hasn't been thought through. This has been the plan always, as it's shown on the screen here. Probably our first plan B would be to look at doing a berm on the far side of the sand golf hole. If we can't do it here. Yes. Yes. Well, it's actually, I think, on the same school.
And
This bridge right here is farther out. So that instead of the protection being here, the ridge could be farther out up there.
We don't know their,
Reaction to that.
we don't, they may still want,
It's gonna require, I think, well, maybe
I'd require the same release. I would think,
change.
Unless you're right.
That is correct. Even if we were to do that option. I believe I have everybody's contact information. Mr. Vaughn was here, and unfortunately, oh, you got it? Okay, good.
What did he leave?
At
At a minimum, it sounds like none of you have received hard copies.
of the easement, I'm happy to, if you give, I could write down all the addresses and go print them and give you hard copies now. I could email you electronic versions here this afternoon. I could get those to you however you want, and then we could help you execute them if there's anybody willing and able to execute them now. Happy to do that now. I think we have the staff that could help with that.
Is there anyone we haven't heard from at all?
Yes, yeah, there are still a decent number. I think the stretch between the Brights and the Blands, I think we've heard from almost everybody. Those other kind of pockets, there are definitely folks we have not talked to.
Except for one from Texas, you said it came back.
Came right back, yeah.
So,
But I think in your stretch, I think Mr. Vaughn was the last one we hadn't heard
Or
from.
how about the folks next to Brenda? What's her name again?
yeah, they're never.
Oh, Mitchell, yes,
You haven't heard from them.
correct.
Maybe somebody can try to reach out to them specifically.
Has anyone tried knocking on?
Lanigan?
They were supposed to be here. I-
That's you, okay.
Oh, Rich is here. Hey, Rich. How you doing?
Barnes, I think we've heard from everybody in that stretch.
How about the Novaks? They're 3005.
Did they sell?
No.
No.
Oh, I have them as SWA, so that's a,
They live
they're not in Texas?
No, they live in Mount Pleasant. They're from Greenville, but the daughter, Sarah Novak, is in Mount Pleasant. She didn't hear anything. I talked to her the other day, so.
I think she is one, let me see, I actually have the, yeah, SWA Partners, I think, is who we have.
Okay.
1420 Lagoon Park Circle. We have their address, but not their email. Do you happen to have her email you could provide?
I do.
Okay,
Oh, yes.
so that would be helpful. Seidner, anybody know Tyler Seidner is one? They're down there, 3305.
I said I would knock on their door if you'd like me to.
Linda Bradley, 3401. Anybody know her?
We know her
We've
well
seen
enough
it to say hi walking,
say hi.
but.
So we haven't had any contact with her, and Karen Clark, 3615. She's down in one of the pockets.
Okay.
So there are a handful that we still haven't had any contact with.
Sounds like people know
Yeah.
that, I mean, they keep asking.
Well,
to
he
knock
doesn't,
on door- I mean,
he's gonna knock on their
you're
door.
knocking
Right.
someone's door, or- I
He
mean,
could not.
Rick is a trooper. He's not shy.
I'll knock on anybody.
So he's
I'm not
been,
running for anything, but I'm
yeah,
knocking on
he's
doors.
been very good about reaching out. We appreciate
This is what
that.
happens when you retire.
Yeah.
Should have kept working.
All right, I think we're ready to turn off the live stream, and then if you just will tell me what we can do for you, including emailing you directly, printing directly, helping you execute, happy to do that. And we will have this stream available for anybody that you come across who wasn't able to be here, so they can hopefully get any questions answered.
And you're also gonna get a thing from the city attorney, giving his opinion of the contract, so you offered that.
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah, well, we will see if we can, I think our plan there is to see if the Wild Dunes attorneys are willing to, identify the work through an exhibit or some more precise way.
Correct.
I think that if that happens, we'll let you know
And
that.
then would you also check with the city department and make sure they have
Yes.
permission for the elevation?
Yeah. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.